First, let me just say welcome everyone to HPNC's summer meeting in July 2026. And we're welcoming Sue Antolin. She has authored two books, Artichoke Season and The Years That Went Missing. Is a co-editor along with Gary Gay and Carolyn Hall of the San Francisco Haiku Anthology, Volume 2, and edits the journal Acorn. She has been a member of HPNC since the early 2000s and has served in many of the roles, including newsletter editor, Mariposa editor, webmaster, and president. In October, she will attend CBEC Haiku Getaway as a featured guest and looks forward to spending time exploring the theme celebrating play and playful verse. And now here's Sue.
Thank you, Gary. And thank you, everyone, all of the officers for inviting me. I really appreciate this opportunity. I'm going to share my screen. Great. Well, thank you for being here, especially on a day when the World Cup finals is being played. I really appreciate that you chose to be here. Also, thank you for anyone who may have seen a version of this before. I did give this sort of an early version of this talk to a group in San Diego. It was all focused on grief haiku, but it was about measuring time. And then I also gave a version to a group in India, virtually, of course. I didn't go to India, but I have changed it a little bit. So I hope you'll find something new if you've seen it before. So my focus today is not on examining the haiku moment itself, although we will talk about that a little bit, or the aha moment when some realization strikes the poet and inspires them to make the haiku, which is a topic well covered in essays by other poets. I'd like to consider instead haiku in which evoking some measure of time seems, to me anyway, to be part of the subject matter of the poem. The passage of time, how quickly it passes, how fleeting life feels, is one of the central themes not only of haiku, but of all poetry. A preoccupation with the passage of time is something that unites us as humans. How do we measure it? How do we account for its passing? Do we perceive it differently from one another? Do our perceptions of time shift as we age or in relation to particular life events? Traditionally, of course, haiku have emphasized or even perhaps required a seasonal element. Seasons, though, are inherently dynamic. The earth spins, the seasons do not hold still. By placing a poem in any particular season, a sense of time's passing is evoked. While to some extent contemporary English language haiku continue this tradition, season is only one of the many ways the passage of time is conveyed in haiku. For today's discussion, I've organized the sample poems into broad categories, which, while it may seem like an oversimplification, I hope will be a useful way to consider the different ways time is presented in haiku. And before we get started with the sample poems, I have a couple of quotes that I found especially apt. This by St. Augustine. Question: what is time? Answer: if no one asks me, I know. If I am asked, I do not know. I find that very true. And by Jorge Luis Borges, I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, being with you and not being with you is the only way I have to measure time. I think that's beautiful. Okay, so the first category of ways that we measure time in haiku is numeric measures. So it seems like the most obvious way is to just put a number on it. So 21 weeks, The Slight Curve of the Sky by Christina Nguyen. 21 weeks places the speaker of this haiku in the 5th month of pregnancy, a time when the fetus is still very small. The second line, the slight curve, acts as a pivot, describing both the pregnant woman's body and the sky. When we see a woman in her 5th month of pregnancy, that she is pregnant may not be immediately obvious. And when we look at the sky, it is also not obvious that the sky is curved or that the line of the horizon bends. The poet might have chosen another way to indicate this stage of pregnancy, but by using the number of weeks, she is opting for the standard way pregnant women and obstetricians generally speak of pregnancy, which adds authenticity to the poem. Ice Ferns, Dad's 11th Day in ICU by Peter Newton. This haiku gives us a specific measured unit of time, 11 days, but it also hints at ways we might interpret that length of time. Ice ferns as an opening image is evocative. I think of ice ferns as beautiful and intricately patterned. It's an image from the natural outdoor world, which offers a contrast to the bleak, sterile hospital environment. Yet ice ferns also have a bleakness to them as well. Their intricate patterns are frozen, just as the complex life of this dad may appear frozen in time as he lies here in the ICU, hooked up to monitors, and perhaps not even conscious. Ice ferns often look as though they will spread. Will this dad's time in the ICU continue to grow beyond these 11 days? One gets a vivid sense of how slowly time is passing in this situation and how painfully long 11 days must feel for the speaker of this haiku. Snow Angel, More Than Half My Life Behind Me by Kristen Lindquist. In terms of form, Snow Angel follows a similar pattern to the previous poem. It begins with a clear visual image in line 1, and abstract thought in lines 2 and 3, containing a specific measure of time, half a life. I'm including this in the category of numeric measures of time because it uses a fraction, even though the exact number of years that comprises a life is, of course, unknowable. The thought on its own, that the speaker feels that more than half her life is behind her, is not enough in itself to make an interesting poem. But the first line gives us the clear image of the snow angel, so that when we read lines 2 and 3, we imagine the speaker lying in the snow, waving her arms and legs up and down to form the shape of an angel. In that position on the ground, facing up with the snow at her back, the thought that more than half her life is behind her feels authentic and moving. What is literally behind her body at that moment is all of the planet. That perhaps more than half her life has passed feels to me like a spontaneously occurring realization. Such large realizations do generally occur at the oddest of moments while we're engaged in a mundane activity. Here, the activity is one that is most often associated with children, so we have the added resonance of considering an adult lying down in the snow as if she were a child again. And that gap in time between making snow angels as a child and now more than half a life later again as an adult creates the poignancy of the moment. Now the present moment. Wide blue sky, wide blue sea, this moment enough by Jenny Fraser. Even when a poem seems to enact only the present moment, as this one does, I feel an awareness of a past and a future is also implied. How long does this moment last? Long enough to take a breath, a few minutes, an afternoon, a stage of life? The one-line structure of this haiku mimics the horizon line between sea and sky, yet the line does not stretch across the entire page. The poet's economy with words fits with the sense of enough in the poem, which helps convince me of its emotional truth. A poet who genuinely feels that the moment is enough has the self-control to resist overwriting the poem. There's no ornamentation. These few words are all we need. The way the poem is crafted convinces me that the sentiment is authentic. Here, for now, first snow. by John Stevenson. Again, here we have a haiku that purports to take place in the present. The phrase "for now" also implies that it will not last. John Stevenson is one of the great masters of using few words to great effect. This poem consists of only 5 words. Imagine if he had put all 5 words in a single line. The poem would speed past us. Instead, we take in each line one at a time. Here, for now, first snow. The first snow of the year has perhaps blanketed everything, made the outdoor scene beautiful. Or alternatively, the first snow might represent a first difficulty in someone's life. In either case, the message I get is that it, the beauty or the difficulty, will not last, and also that the speaker being here will not last. The words "for now" also answer the question of why we are here. We are here for the moment, to bear witness to whatever it is that is happening now. With so few words, we can freely add our own life circumstances to glean meaning. So the next category I have is short to moderate, unspecified spans of time. Lunch break in a park. The heads of pigeons ticking by Daniel Birnbaum. We can probably all make a reasonable estimation of how long a lunch break in a park might last, longer than a sandwich eaten at one's desk and shorter than sitting down at a restaurant. That the heads of the pigeons are ticking tells us that time is central to this haiku. How can you enjoy a leisurely lunch in the park if the pigeons keep reminding you that the clock is ticking and you need to get back to the office? Hospital corridor. The woman beside me measures her knitting by Frances Angela. There's so many ways to measure time without looking at a clock. For example, sitting in a hospital corridor while someone beside you knits. As a knitter myself, I can imagine the woman not only pulling out a measuring tape to measure her progress, but I also see her holding her project at arm's length to see how it's coming along. In the surreal world of a hospital, looking at a clock on the wall may feel meaningless, while the inches being added to a knit scarf or sweater feel tangible and measurable. This haiku beautifully and authentically captures the altered sense of time one feels in a hospital, and also the sense of community we feel when we find ourselves together with strangers, passing time while waiting. Ceaseless rains. A patch under the banyan, still dry, by Teji Sethi. While the rain seems as if it will go on endlessly, the dry patch under the banyan tree reminds us that it has not, in fact, been raining forever and that it will eventually stop. Without the experience of living where there are monsoons or banyan trees, I can only imagine that it could rain for a very long time, many days perhaps, while some spot under the banyan tree remains dry. I sense a hopefulness in this poem that goes beyond the immediate subject of rain. Teakwood coffin. They wait to see if I cry by Vandana Parashar, who has a new collection coming out soon, by the way, I have heard. How long do these onlookers wait to see whether the speaker in this poem will cry? The situation is so concisely described that I think we can all imagine ourselves in it. We each have a sense for the length of time one might spend at the side of a coffin, resisting letting the tears fall. The tension created between they and the speaker of the poem is wonderful. All sorts of family dynamics play out in times of grief. This haiku shows us just enough for us to imagine the details. I can imagine multiple contrasting situations, such as, for example, imagine the speaker thinking to herself, "Oh, they want to see me cry, but I will not give them the satisfaction." Or, "They want to see if my love was genuine, and I'll show them with my tears." The shade reaches right field. Last call by David Grayson. In this haiku, the ballpark acts as a sort of sundial as the sun moves across the sky and the shade reaches right field. Line 3 adds emphasis to the passing of time by signaling that this is the last chance for spectators to order drinks. This is another creative way to show us the passing of time and places us also in a particular mood as it conjures the atmosphere of a day game. DNR, the sliver of motel soap, still in use, by Sherry Hunter Day. Without mentioning time at all, this haiku presents well-selected details that conjure an entire situation that hinges on the passing of time. The first line tells us that we have a do not resuscitate order in place, or at least contemplated, indicating that someone may be nearing the end of their life. The sliver of motel soap in line 2 is a brilliantly evocative detail. How long does it take to wear down a small bar of soap to a sliver? A few days? A week? Though it isn't specified, I imagine the scenario of an adult child visiting a hospitalized elderly parent. That they're staying in a motel suggests the passage of a significant period of time since they last lived close to one another. Is there no longer a family home to stay in? Do they expect to stay in the motel until the parent passes away? How long will that take? A motel isn't somewhere one usually plans to stay very long. It's a practical situation, a place to sleep when not at the parent's bedside or making other end-of-life arrangements. In the third line, we have the three simple words, still in use, that tell us the bar of soap is still serving its purpose, has not been used up, while the patient in line 1 is still hanging on as well. And an interesting side note, when I asked Sherry about this haiku, it turns out that the actual backstory is less complicated than the one I devised in my reading of it. And this is what Sherry said about it. She said, I hadn't read that poem in a while, but it took me right back to the origin scene. We used to visit a friend in hospice. His refrigerator is where they posted the DNR. A few steps away was his guest bathroom with these shards of hand soap. He told the story about his mom saving hotel soap for the homeless shelter. When she died, there were all these soaps that he couldn't bear to throw out. So I just think that's interesting that the way we read a haiku doesn't necessarily, of course, match the actual backstory. And often some of the best haiku can support many different readings. The passing of seasons. End of summer. The towel rack without his towel, by James Chesting. Line 1 tells us that it is the end of summer, but it is as if that fact does not really hit the speaker until he sees the towel rack missing one towel. That small detail of domestic life suddenly brings the reality of the changing seasons into full focus. Shorter days, the calculus of daylilies. The word calculus connotes mathematical precision, which feels both playful and accurate, as things in nature do often occur with surprising precision. Daylilies have a light-sensitive protein in their leaves, enabling them to act as a molecular clock, counting the hours of daylight and darkness to trigger seasonal changes like bud development. I might have put this one in the numerical one, but I put it here with the seasonal changes. Deathly pale, a lily comes out from under the earth. Eugenia's Zakarsky. Similar to the prior poem, without naming the season at all, this haiku instead uses an image to evoke the season. A lily coming out from under the earth tells us it is spring. Knowing that this haiku was written in Europe not long after the Russian invasion of Ukraine adds valuable context and makes that first line especially meaningful. What sort of world does this lily find when it emerges from its winter spent under the ground? a very different one than existed when it bloomed the year before. I think the poem succeeds perfectly well, even without that added context, but it does gain in poignancy when you know that added information, which is why I think it can be especially interesting to read journals as a historical record of a period of time. Each issue serves as a sort of snapshot of what it was like on Earth at that moment in time. Zigzagged edge of a peach can lid. I wait for spring. Opening a can does not take long, but one gets the sense that the wait for spring has been going on for a while. Enough winter already. The peaches from a can are not satisfying in the way fresh peaches will be, if only spring would hurry. The zigzagged edge of the lid is a wonderfully evocative detail that places us in the mundane, grounded world of this haiku. In comparison with a poem celebrating the fresh peaches of spring or summer, the strength of this haiku is in its focus on the longing for spring and the very precise concrete detail of the zigzagged edge of the lid. Swelling buds. I tell myself there is a tomorrow, by Kala Ramesh. Swelling buds places us clearly in spring, again without using the word spring in the poem. It is as if the speaker doubts for a moment that life will go on, but the swelling buds are proof that it will. We don't know or really need to know what difficulty has caused the speaker to have this moment of questioning, this need to reassure herself that tomorrow will come. But we can freely imagine any number of scenarios based on our own life circumstances. This poem shifts our consideration of time towards the future. While something in the past has caused this temporary dip in confidence, the future is of primary concern and is emphasized by the last word of the poem, tomorrow. Time between life events. Alpine Lake, where we skinny dipped. Now, your ashes. Bob Redmond. The time that has elapsed between skinny dipping, presumably when young and healthy, and now, after a loved one's death, is a moving way to express this measure of years. Knowing that Bob Redmond was also facing a difficult illness at the time he wrote this, and may have been contemplating his own mortality, adds an extra layer of meaning, though it is wonderfully evocative even without that added information. Again, note the restraint the poet shows in not trying to tell us too much. We don't really need to know whose ashes these are. We have just enough to feel the weight of the elapsed years. Home for the funeral. That same blue frisbee, still on their roof, by Gideon Young. The specificity in the detail of the blue frisbee on the roof is what makes this poem feel so authentic. I imagine someone who has returned to their hometown for a funeral, noticing the frisbee on the roof and being transported for a moment into the past when that frisbee was tossed and got stuck on the roof where it remains. How can a life end while a meaningless plastic object stays in place? It brings to mind the many mundane objects left behind when we die. How long could a frisbee remain on a roof? A few months? A year? Longer? Mother's Day. From Mom's Sorry, the scent of mango pickles. Naming a major holiday adds a seasonal element to this haiku, but what I think really adds an interesting measure of time to it is the scent of mango pickles from Mom's Sorry. Scents have such power to bring back memories. Think, for example, of Proust's scent of madeleines dipped in tea. And so I imagine this speaker suddenly recalling so many long ago memories of that same scent, one that I suspect even goes back to his childhood, that all these years are linked by the scent, feels magical and authentic. A lifetime. Flowering bittersweet. The chances I did take, by Elliot Nicely. In this poem, the speaker seems to contemplate his entire lifetime thus far. I love the twist from what I think is the more common sentiment of looking back on life and feeling regret about all the chances one did not take. Here, the speaker instead recognizes the chances he did take. I find this a fresh and uplifting perspective. A few flakes drifting here and there, our years together, by Barbara Unger. Here, the placement of the words on the page enacts the meaning in the poem. The words appear to fall across the page as if they were snowflakes, creating a lovely mood as the speaker considers her years together with her loved one. It isn't necessary to know that her partner had recently died, but that does add to its depth. Home after the news. Morning dishes. A lifetime ago. By Laurie Greer. While this poem uses the word lifetime, the span of time described is likely just a few hours. Whatever the news is, it is so life-altering that it feels as though a lifetime has passed. We can easily imagine returning home after some major news to see dishes in the sink and feel that the life lived in that kitchen earlier that same day is as if it occurred in a different lifetime. Again, part of the strength of the poem is in not attempting to tell us too much. We don't need to know what the news was, just the feeling it left her with when she returned to the morning dishes. Those hours changed everything. Short Timers in the Prison Yard, Mayflies by Johnny Baranski. This haiku makes me think about the vastly different lifespans of other species as compared with humans. While the incarcerated may not be there for life, we usually associate a prison yard with long spans of time. What a vivid contrast the mayflies add to this. Not only are their lives brief, they have the freedom to come and go from the prison yard if they choose, or if the breeze blows a certain way. That Baranski knew from personal experience as a peace activist imprisoned for his nonviolent resistance to war and nuclear weapons, what it was like to be in prison, adds depth to this haiku. Until I am earth again, rain moving through the blue stem, by Chad Lee Robinson. Until I am earth again is such an interesting way to describe the length of time one has left as a body before that body dies and decomposes, becoming earth. How many years is that? Time measured in generations. Dying light, telling them the fairy tale you once told me, by Benedict Grant. Stories passed down from one generation to the next link one lifetime to another. We have three generations evoked here. The speaker remembers his childhood and hearing this fairy tale that he is now telling to the next generation. While the past and present are clearly contained here, I feel the implied promise of this fairy tale continuing to be told, even to future generations. It's beautiful that we are not talking about a physical object being passed from one generation to the next, though of course there are objects like that that could make great subjects for haiku. Rather, we have a story, which for millennia has probably been one of the most enduring things to be handed from generation to generation. Eternity. The eons I wasn't here, the eons I won't be. Winter Stars by Billy Wilson. Almost any time the stars or planets are included in a poem, we get a sense of the vastness of time beyond our own lifetime. This haiku states the obvious in a way, but this moment of epiphany feels authentic as the speaker looks up at the winter stars and feels the endless reach of time in both directions, before her birth and long after her death. Old Linden Tree, Before Me and After, by Anna Maris. This haiku has a similar effect to the prior poem, but uses the image of a tree instead of the stars. An old linden tree will not exist for the eons evoked in the prior poem, but its lifespan is considerably longer than one human life. I wonder how often any of us contemplates that measure of time. When walking through a forest or sitting on a beach, for example, so many of the natural objects around us will exist far longer than we will. That realization can shift our perspective, reminding us of our small place in the larger natural world. Note also that the words before me have the additional meaning that the tree is there in front of her. The casket lowered. I wake daily into the wrong life, by Vivian Hua. The ongoingness of this loss is conveyed with the word daily. We don't know how long this will continue, but with the mention of the casket lowered, it appears that the death is still quite recent, and we hope that what feels daily now will eventually ease. Her being dead goes on, by John Stevenson. This haiku also summons a sense of eternity. Once someone has died, their absence continues forever. The way these words are stacked one upon the other creates a shape that brings to my mind the shape of a casket. I don't know if it was intended as a concrete haiku, but I have long felt it that way. The spareness of this poem is also stunning. I feel as though even one additional word would risk ruining the poem entirely. The complete and devastating loss is so perfectly conveyed. The pace of time's passing. Bus stop, a little girl pedals by in butterfly wings, by Dan Curtis. Each line of this haiku presents a different mode of transportation. We go from a bus to a bicycle to a butterfly. Imagine someone waiting at a bus stop, anticipating boarding a bus and traveling at a certain speed across town. That conjures a certain mindset. When a little girl appears on a bicycle, an entirely different pace of travel and of experiencing time enters the poem. In line 3, when we see that she is wearing butterfly wings, we sense the fluttering pace of a butterfly, so that this short poem encompasses all three, the bus, the bicycle, and the butterfly. It's one of my favorite poems. One can't help sense the speaker's delight in watching the little girl pass by the bus stop. It's as if she's a little messenger telling us not to rush through our busy lives. Napping to the sound of a ball game, Autumn Afternoon, by Bruce Feingold. Everything in this poem creates an atmosphere evocative of a certain pace of time's passing. Napping in the afternoon with the sound of a ball game on the radio or on the TV, or a game close enough to be heard through an open window, conveys an unhurried pace that is familiar and so appealing. Train journey, moonlight settles on my lap, by Hemapriya Chalapan. A train journey conjures a certain pace of experiencing time. The train speeds along and we settle in for the journey, although here is the moonlight that settles on the speaker's lap, a lovely way to show us the relaxed pace of a long journey by train. This is an entirely different way of experiencing time as compared to riding a crowded commuter train in the morning rush hour. The moonlight, as well as the word journey, show us that we're likely crossing a long distance. And the last category I have is the surreal. Funeral morning. I join my son inside his time machine, by John McManus. Some poems reject normal, real-world notions of time entirely. Here, a child creates a time machine just when it is most needed, on the day of a funeral. The grieving adult joins the child in escaping reality in favor of this altered time. Will they pretend to visit the past or the future or some parallel time altogether? The surreal feels perfectly needed here. Empty Park. Two crows start the world over by Robert Epstein. What if we could start the world all over? Go back to the beginning of time and reset the clock and start again. There are times when the news makes me think that might be an appealing alternative. If only we could begin again. And that's the last one I have. But I'd like to end with this quote. I found so many fun quotes as I was looking at time. Time is a game played beautifully by children, by Heraclitus. And I think a lot of what we do when we're writing haiku is trying to return to a childlike sensibility, a childlike way of viewing life. Oh, thank you.